Hello. Hi, this is Denise. Welcome. Welcome. Hello. I'm Denise Hesselroth, and this talk is What is Intentional Tarot and How Do I Start Using it? I'm just going to be reading it from my pages here because when I try to start talking off the top of my head, things just don't go well. So please forgive me for reading this presentation and probably way too fast. First, I want to say thank you to Jake Ryan and Anna and Llewellyn for putting on this great LlewellynCon and for giving me this chance to do this presentation. It's been an amazing week. I'll start with a summary of what I think intentional tarot is and then go into more detail. In this method of using the tarot cards, we are doing the opposite of a traditional reading. We start with an answer instead of a question. We select the cards face up instead of face down. We send our intentions out instead of pulling them in. And we attempt to change the world instead of hoping to change our lives. We become energy participants instead of energy recipients. Some background. James Wells was the keynote speaker of the 2018 North Star Tarot Conference here in the Twin Cities. And at one of the door prize drawings, I won the big prize. James had donated a full session of his Reason for Being series, and I won. At the end of our 4 sessions, he'd help me focus on my tarot journey and take my personal tarot practice to the next step. That resulted in me setting down these ideas, and thanks to Barbara Moore and Llewellyn, getting them published in my Intentional Tarot book. I'll just show it to you quick. It's so pretty. Laura Kurtz is my editor on the book, and the amazing overall design is by Samantha Penn, and the beautiful cover is by Shannon Newland. I'm just so proud of it. So I'm very grateful they took a chance with me, even though I've never read the cards for strangers professionally. Now, there's lots of ways to work with tarot, and in the book, I focus on these 3. First slide, please. Interpretation, activation, and intention. The most common way of working with the cards is interpreting what the cards are telling us. Since I bought my first deck 40 years ago, I've been inspired and enlightened by the information and advice I've received from the tarot readings. Through the cards, I feel I'm receiving something from the universe: love, care, attention, but I'll just call it energy. The cards kept giving and giving from their limitless source. I felt an energy flow from the universe through the cards to me. Eventually, I wanted more and more to send some of that energy back to the universe, to actually do something about the issues that I kept asking the cards about. These 3 methods use energy in different ways. Tarot interpretation is like it can be represented by the magician. The universe gives you energy when it responds to your questions during a reading. You take the universal energy and make it into tools you can use to deal with your issues. The magician reminds us of the tenet, as above, so below, meaning things that happen on one level of reality are also reflected on other levels. In a traditional reading, like the magician, we bring down the gift of universal energies and make use of them to effect changes on our level of existence. Tarot activation can be represented by the world because of the circle image. During a traditional reading, you can bring the universal energies around in a circle, that which you receive and that which you send out. The inner and outer worlds become one. Yourself is linked with all things, and you're an active participant in the flow of universal energies. And intentional tarot can be represented by the Fool. You're emitting your intentions from your own store of universal energy in blind faith that you can have an effect on the world. Like the Fool's journey, the energy begins with us. Take a leap. Select the cards face up in the same way that the Fool has their face up. and send out your intentions like the fool with their arms wide open. So I won't go further into interpretation today because a lot of you are probably way better at it than I am. And I'll put aside talking about activating a traditional reading until the end in case I run out of time. The point with intentional tarot is to start within yourself and project your energies, intentions outward from there for the greater good. In a traditional reading, we want to learn something about a benefit to the question at hand, ideally so that we can take some appropriate actions. With intentional tarot, we want to do something of benefit to someone or some situation. So, how can I start using intentional tarot? Next slide, please. These are the basic steps for doing an intentional tarot spread. And they look just like those for a traditional reading. Notice I used the phrase intentional tarot spread instead of intentional tarot reading. I'll try to cover some of my suggested vocabulary at the end of my talk. We focus, we select some cards, we lay out the cards, we meditate on the cards, and we have some kind of closing. First, you focus on your goal. Instead of starting with a question, we start with an answer or a solution or a goal that we would like to manifest. Some caveats right away. One person's intention might be the exact opposite of another person's intention. For example, if two people send out their energies to manifest getting the same exact job, I don't have an answer for that situation, but I don't think that invalidates all intentional uses of tarot to express your desires to the universe. In that case, I might simply word my intention as, I've found meaningful employment. Instead of, in 10 minutes, I'll get an email offering me that specific job. Another caveat, no one is perfect. No one completely understands any situation. You might send out intentions for someone you care about, but that's not at all what they want. In those cases, I have faith that the intentions of love and goodwill are what matter. And the universe might take care of the details in a different way than you've suggested. Second, select the cards. Instead of selecting cards randomly, face down, we select them with intention, either based on your interpretation of what the cards mean, or it could be based entirely on the images or feelings you get from the cards. You can use more than one deck. I once did a spread using the 3 of Wands from 5 different decks with the world right in the center, and it really felt powerful. It was about waiting for the elections in November and sending out my desires for that. I could have picked out all the cards with the color blue in them and ignored the traditional real meanings of all of the cards and focused on a blue wave, and you might choose red. Or since cups often have a lot of blue in them and the 4 court cards often have people on them, I could represent my desire for a lot of blue voters by putting those cards in my fridge with magnets and concentrate on that desire every time I walk by. So the book includes over a dozen ideas for each card, examples on why you might select that card for an intentional tarot spread. But those are just examples. They're not standards and they're not a definitive list at all. Next, you lay out the cards. As with the traditional tarot, the spread or layout we use for placing the cards will add meanings to the cards. I've come up with a spread that I just called the intentional tarot spread because for me, it addresses many concepts that I personally think are important. The first position is my understanding. Not everyone has the full story, so you are framing your intentions as to how you understand the situation that you're putting this spread down for. And this is the place where I often vent my frustration about the situation I'm addressing. This is where I'll put the Tower if I feel like everything is falling apart, or Justice, or the 5 or 7 or 9 of Swords, or 4 of Pentacles, 3 of Swords. Sometimes I just paint a picture of how I'm feeling, especially if I'm frustrated. I'll put down 15 cards and I'll read the story and I'll think, how can this be happening? So the second position is my goal, the crux of why you're doing that spread, your desires for the situation you've described in my understanding. For me, my goals usually fall into 3 categories. Next slide, please. And those are change, protection, and manifestation. A change example is if I have a disease in me and I want to get better, I'll ask for that to change. Or if there's a disease in society that needs to change. Protection is example and a protection example is if I or a friend will be traveling. I will ask for safety and protection for the journey. Or you could ask for protection from COVID for a vulnerable loved one. A manifestation example is if you want to bring something into your life, like employment or transportation options, or maybe even new personal relationships. The third position is my promise. I get really frustrated when national leaders respond to a tragedy with only thoughts and prayers. While I do think intentional tarot is a form of action, I also include something immediate that I can contribute to the situation. Maybe a promise to donate money or bring something physical to those in need. And the fourth position is my gratitude. I like to balance out the experience with something related to the situation that I'm grateful about. It just feels right. I'll flip through the cards and set aside all those that speak to me about the situation at hand. Then I'll go through those cards, because I usually have so many, and try to fine tune my thoughts and intentions to just 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 1 in each position that epitomizes what I want to get across to the universe. Doing intentional tarot spreads that way can take a lot longer than traditional reading, because flipping through 78 cards and examining your feelings about them can take a while. You can also select them by spreading them out face up into an arc, but I like being able to see the more of the image. And of course, if you know exactly what cards you're thinking of, you can just quickly page through the cards and pluck them out. Once you have the cards laid out in a spread, you express your desires. Every person will do this in their own way. This can be out loud, or in a silent internal monologue, or any way you commune with whatever force you think is out there. If you're verbally inclined, like me, there are lots of ways you can express your intentions. One way is in the form of the supplication format. Please help me find a reliable means of transportation. Another way is in the form of active manifestation, like the law of attraction. I have purchased a good car that I can afford. Or you could just picture the outcome in a nonverbal way, through meditation or art or movement or so forth. Think about your goals and spend some time on this phrase. You can picture your energy moving from your heart across the cards out into the universe. In the same way, when we do a traditional reading, I feel the energy comes from the universe through the cards to us. Lastly, close out the experience in a meaningful way. I usually leave the spread out on the table all day or several days. And every time I glance at it, I think of my goals again and I renew my intentions. When I do put the cards away, I put the main one from the goal at the end of the deck, because then it feels like the energy continues on, even when I put the cards in the bag back in the drawer. So those are the basics of doing an intentional tarot spread. But as I've hinted at in my examples, there's infinite ways to intentionally select and focus on tarot cards in order to facilitate sending your energies out to the universe for the greater good. Now we'll go back to the activation phase on my first slide. In the context of reading tarot for my friends and family, it's been really interesting to take the next step after interpreting the cards and offer to activate the reading. If there's a most likely outcome card, I ask them to select one or more cards that express what their preferred outcome. Most of them don't know what the traditional meanings are of any of the cards. What I usually do is ask them to flip through the cards face up and stop whenever they see one that they think fits with the outcome that they would really like to have happen. They'll usually ask me what the card really means, and I'll let them know sometimes, but I'll also say that right now it means exactly whatever you thought it meant when you picked it for this situation. Then I'll have them set the cards on or near the cards from the reading and think about what they want. Sometimes we'll talk about things further, or perhaps we'll select some more cards intentionally or do a whole nother traditional reading based on how they thought about what they want from that first reading. I believe that intentional tarot can help people practice decision making and can help them feel that they have greater agency in their lives than they might think. So this has been a really great week listening to many of the presenters so far. And I've never been a professional reader and I've never had any clients, but one thing I realized this week is that this method might not be a good method for a client professional reader context. Apparently, some clients come to professionals with a clear idea of what they want to hear in the interpretation of random cards. And obviously, that's not appropriate for a traditional reading. From what I've just described about intentional tarot, I can imagine some clients thinking of professional readers as magic wish-granting gurus if the client is selecting the cards and telling the reader exactly what they want. So I assume professionals would have to know their clients really well to know if offering any intentional activation for a reading is a good idea at that moment or not. But intentional tarot has been a useful tool for me to focus my energies on trying to affect change in the universe. A quick word on vocabulary, and then we can open it up for questions. You might have noticed I never talk about an intentional tarot reading. I always use the word spread instead. In traditional tarot, we have a querent and a reader. Sometimes they're the same person, and they put down random cards and do a reading in order to interpret the meaning. For traditional tarot, I found a really cool old word that nobody uses anymore to take the place of querent. A querent is someone who asks about something, one who questions. And a precant is someone who asks for something, or technically one who prays. I like old words. So I also needed a phrase to replace do a reading, because a reading implies taking in something. So I came up with a spread to do a spread, because we already have the word spread in our vocabulary. So I'm just adding another layer of meaning to it. So we can turn on questions. That'll take a couple seconds. And then I have one last thing. So we have a precant, sometimes more than one, who does a spread with deliberately selected cards in order to influence how the universe unfolds. Those are the basics. I'll be reading the questions. I'll remember to read them out loud. And I know it takes a minute for them to come up. So I hope I didn't go too fast. And thanks everybody for coming. It's been such a great week. And we'll get the questions going. If there are any. Thank you. Thank you for the Compliments. What is a good intentional card for manifesting weight loss? That's a good one. I would say maybe the Four of Coins, because that person, traditionally, I mostly use the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. That person is holding on to something. So instead of doing reversed, I sometimes just think of the opposite. Or you could place it reversed and think of, instead of holding on, you let go. I just love the cover of my book. It's so beautiful. And if anybody's in the Twin Cities, the North Star Tarot Conference is late January, early February, every day. I mean, every year. And it's really a good experience, put on by Nancy Antonucci and Mel Weber. And Michael. Okay, how often would you use this intentional format, and how long do you recommend they sit in activation? I use this almost every day. I put on my Instagram, I was putting up a daily thing, but I've kind of put that aside for now. So maybe every day if it's a certain topic. And you could even put it in a frame. If a certain card means something to you, put it in a frame and nail it to your wall and just look at that every day for years and years and years, if it's something important to you. Yeah, so April was saying she likes the word conversation instead of reading, which I think is really valid for a traditional interaction, because there is energy coming, and then you're going to try to do something about what you've seen in the reading. So that's really great. Yeah, you can dedicate one deck for this purpose and keep them in order, or you can use your favorite deck. What copy the card to hand on wall to do the manifestation? You could copy the card, yes. Right, you could Xerox it and maybe make some art around it, paint it or put spangles on it and put it on there. Absolutely. One thing I've done is made a deck using my first deck ever and the New Vision Tarot, because you don't need a back when it's intentional. And I put this in a game sleeve. So that's not an intentional tarot deck, but it's a deck you can move. But look how big it gets. It's lots of extra, because it's two decks. And this, yeah. So then you could add an element of randomness by splaying these all out, and then some come up one way and some come up the other way, and so there's some randomness there, and then you select from the pile ones that grab you. So that's another way to do it. And that way it's not permanent. You could glue them together too, which I'm going to practice on different types of glue and see what that works. But these cards, the corners get very sharp and pokey, and the deck gets very thick. Oh, somebody wanted to see the cover. Thank you, Glenn. A pretty book. How pretty that is. It's got a shooting star. It's my secret shooting star. Yeah. Yeah, I thought of maybe doing an intentional tarot deck, but I thought, well, there's so many decks out there, and you don't want a back. You don't want just a front, because with intentional, you are going to look at it. So no sense having a blind back. Shuffling two decks together works very well. What card to use for finding safe, nice, new housing apartment? Again, sometimes thinking in reverse, maybe the Five of Pentacles, which shows them outside, but you're putting that energy for being on the inside where it's warm, or the Six of Swords where they're escaping. You're going to escape to a nice, new, comfortable place. Those could help for finding good lodgings. Secret Forest Tarot is another two-sided deck. Secret Forest Tarot, yeah. So with these sleeves, you can just mix and match all of your favorite decks. And I like adding an element of randomness with the selection. So you put them out there, and that works really well with the deck that you don't know very well. Like I think Cosmic Tarot, Cosmic by Norbert. Anyway, that one I just love. I grab those pictures and face up, and I don't really know what they mean until I look at them really closely, but that helps too. And sometimes it can help having a deck that you don't know very well. Then you're using your psychic intuition to grab a picture that you like, and then find out what the meaning is if you don't know the deck really well. What was the name of the deck that shows the back of the traditional Rider-Waite-Smith cards? It's called New Vision Tarot. Can't see who it's by, but it's New Vision Tarot. And it's really fascinating. There's the tower, and there's the back of the tower. There's Six of Swords. It's the back of the Six of Swords. So yeah, it's really fun in this context. Yeah, comfortable home is also 10 of Cups, 10 of Coins, 9 of Coins. It's very true. Thank you. And I think that might be all the questions. But I'll just hang out. What's the most exciting thing you were able to manifest using this method? That's a good question. Actual things, tangible things. I do more internal work, helping me feel more confident, helping me, those types of things. I did concentrate on my two daughters to find homes that they really liked. And within a month, one in October and one in November, they both bought their own homes on their own, without their fellows people being on the loan. So that worked. They both have very nice homes. Thank you. Did you do an intentional spread? Yes, I did do an intentional tarot spread when I first started thinking about writing these down. And that's how I got those four positions: my understanding, my goal, my promise, my gratitude. Those came up as four cards. And it's like, oh yeah, that's what I should do. Which card worked for me for homes? I might have taken that other person's suggestion and done like the 10 of coins, 10 of coins, 10 of cups. Those are good for homes. What's the best card for manifesting open, positive communication? I could quickly look at my index and look under communication, and it would be Knight of Swords, Queen of Swords. Community is 3 of Cups. I don't know the cards as well as most people, though. That's exactly what I do. Which card worked for you? Oh, I did that one. I'm excited about this perspective too. It's been really eye-opening. And they're a pebble in the stream. You know, it's not like magic, like boom, it's gonna happen. It's a pebble in a stream. It's a butterfly's wings, but it's something. Oh, the Tarot Conference. Yeah, the Twin Cities North Star Tarot Conference. I think